there's no need to. Because if you inspect him in December, it's gonna sit empty for 2 months.
Okay, thank you.
Recording in progress.
So, I would like to call this March 22nd special meeting of the council to order. And we do not have the flag up, so we'll dispense with the pledge of allegiance. Leanne, could you call the roll for council?
Sandy Flora.
Present.
Spencer Kingery.
Present.
Cody Nelson.
Present.
And Dave Weckerly. Present. And Mike Isaac.
So, thank you for this great turnout, people. We're here tonight to talk about rental property registration and inspection as a discussion topic. It's something that the city is considering. I hope that you have all signed in. If not, please do before you leave. So a few ground rules for tonight. We have a lot of people, and in order to give everyone a chance to speak, we'll limit the talks with people there to 3 minutes, and then if we have time, we'll go back around. So when you are recognized, please state your name. If you've signed in, we already have your address, so you don't need to worry about that. And remember to stay on topic and to be respectful of others and to be safe. And with that, is there anything else from council before we begin? Okay, so if you would please indicate whether you wish to speak by raising your hand, and then we'll.
Oh, are you just gonna start off? Okay, Everett Snowbird, and I've been in the rental business for over 30 years. I've been in the process of selling my Delphi rentals, and the sale will complete here in a few more months. But I have had rental in West Lafayette under the West Lafayette rental inspection rules, and it is a very good set of rules. The criteria that you have here that was posted on the Delphi website, it looks like in my opinion, a very poorly put together thing. It's a copy and paste from another city's rental inspection. West Lafayette does not differentiate between houses or apartment complexes. Doesn't matter whether they're managed or not. You know, everything gets inspected. And the reason that they did that is it's a West Lafayette's a campus town. And if you watch the movie Animal House, that's what they were trying to prevent. You know, and they've done a very good job of it. You know, the rental inspections in West Lafayette cost $225 every 2 years. And on their website, you can go and pull up the sheets that they use for the inspection criteria. It has everything that they're required to check, you know, when you do an inspection. And it's very simple. It's very safety related. Things like, you know, if there's a gas dryer that's not there, does the gas line have a valve to shut it off? Is the line capped if the dryer's not there? You know, are there GFI outlets near the sinks and bathroom fixtures? Does a water heater have a temperature pressure relief valve? And is it piped down to the floor as required by the rules? And basically what you look at is the West Lafayette inspection is, does it comply to the most fundamental building codes in the state or in the nation, so to speak? Most landlords in Delphi, the vast majority of them, do a very good job of keeping up their property. There are a few that do not. The question is, should the few that do not, to get them in line, should the others have to be punished and make them pay to have the inspections when the ones that don't keep their properties up, you know, they're not even doing what they should, you know. 20 years ago, I was asked to determine where a water leak was above the print shop here in Delphi. I went through the exterior entrance, up the stairs to the upper level apartment. And I walked inside, I knocked on the door, and when the people let me inside, I found that the kitchen sink did not have a drain that was connected. And the tenants had put a bucket underneath the drain to catch the water, and they would
That's 3 minutes.
periodically dump it in the toilet. The reason being is the landlord was too cheap to repair the plumbing. This is a fundamental thing that, upsets me.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes. State your name, please.
My name's Doyle Miller, and I've owned properties and been a realtor in this town since like 1986. I want to thank you and the council for your concern about the buildings and stuff. I think we're kind of going about it in a, sort of like what Everett said, you're doing something on everybody for what a few people have done. There's so much liability that could be put on the city by doing something like this. We did talk to the clerk treasurer of Aurora, and it seems like that what they did turned out to be a complete disaster. They had so much trouble with trying to enforce it and do that and that. So anyway, they wouldn't recommend it. They don't even enforce it now because it's just a problem. Not intended, unintended consequences is what happens. As a property owner, I take title to something, fee simple title. You start making rules, you're taking that away, you're devaluating my property. I could put liability on anybody that does that to you. I guess my question, I have more questions than anything, is why are we doing this? Is there a specific reason or a specific group of people or what?
I don't think we're here necessarily to, we're here to hear what your concerns are. And I don't think we'll probably be responding because we don't have a draft ordinance that we're looking at for the city of Delphi at this time.
I understand that, but it's being
So
brought
we-
up that you want to do that, and there has to be a reason that you want to do that. And as a taxpayer, why are we talking about this? It's, in my opinion, it's government-owned reach anyways, but I'm not here to challenge that, because I like Delphi, I've been here my whole life. I think the good neighbor policy is how we've always handled it in the past. If I have somebody that's screwing something up, I'm gonna go over and talk to them. And I think the city can do the same thing, or they could have one of us talk to them. So I think this is kind of I don't really see the point in it, actually, because I think you're putting liability on the city, the cost versus whatever you rent. I have one property owner that had 70-some properties. In that whole time, they only had 3 fires. You're talking about buildings and tenants, you can't even divide that up among rentals and not rentals. You got people who live here and do stupid things, and you got people who do good things. I own my properties, I fix them up. If I have to deal with all this, why would I do it else? That's kind of just, I think good neighbor policies will handle this. Thanks.
Anyone else?
No, you go right ahead.
I just wanted to share Gail Connor, 510 East Franklin. I did a little research, and there's a small town in southern Indiana that just recently went through a lawsuit against their city council, their mayor. And the crux of it was that when you have excessive enforcement of something like inspections on a targeted group of people, you're violating the law. And in that lawsuit, I guess it carried on for 4 years, and attorney fees mounted, and the city lost, and they wound up being told they had to pay $70,000 in attorney's fees through this process. So I just want to caution that if you're going to do something with inspections, be careful not to target a group of people, because you might be violating the law.
Chad Newbomb. It's a great example right there, actually. as to further on what she had just said, to leave my opinion out of it, I had also heard somebody else speak of a government overreach standpoint, and that's clearly where this lies in. And the highest law in our nation is the Supreme Court, and they uphold the Constitution, which take away my opinion, anybody else's opinion in this room, and there's amendments to the Constitution that are in place to uphold public privacy, freedoms, rights, things of this nature. And there's multiple countries throughout the world that are under what we consider communist dictatorship that have had
Would you
similar
address
things
your-
that
excuse
that
me.
were literally.
Excuse me, we're here to address comments specifically to the rental property.
It is. It is. I'm speaking on the Fourth Amendment, which specifically talks about property. I didn't interrupt anybody else.
Just trying to bring it back to topic.
Right. So when it comes to regulatory committees and such, that's one thing. But when it comes to deeming what is allowed to be done on somebody's private property, it's a complete government overreach. And I wasn't going to quite go there, but it is. We fought a war a long, long time ago to establish a piece of paper that protects our rights, liberties, and freedoms. And nothing's changed about that piece of paper. There's a lot of policies, especially in these last 3 years, that we could see that's incompetent policies.
So, I'm not gonna stand because I think my voice probably carries. My name is Doug Hines. I don't live here in your Fairtown, but I have owned a couple of properties here over the course of the last few years, not nearly as many as the last two gentlemen, the first two gentlemen, sorry. The thing that I would say is I'm familiar with dealing with the rental registration and inspection process in another municipality. You're gonna, if you implement this, you're gonna experience a couple of side factors that I don't think anybody may have considered. One of which is you probably will end up with several landlords selling out here in town, which maybe is part of the goal of it, I'm not sure. But the other thing, and the more likely consequence that's gonna take place is that depending upon how the rental inspector performs their job, if they go through, as this one gentleman talked about in West Lafayette, what they're enforcing is things that are truly safety concerns. A lack of GFCI next to a sink, not enough smoke detectors in the house, or the smoke detectors have been removed by the tenants. What you also are going to discover in this is a lot of times it's not the landlords, it's the tenants that are creating the issue. But if they go beyond that, and they begin to go beyond that, in my opinion, because it becomes a employment, a maintenance of their employment status set of circumstances. I know from firsthand knowledge of sets of houses that are inspected, come back with all of the things repaired that were asked for, and then there's some more inspection comments that are added, and inspections string on and string on and string on for months. You're going to end up with a set of circumstances where it's not the registration fee. The landlords probably will not care about that. But if the required repairs become significant, you're going to see the rents rise. And you'll end up with a set of circumstances in town where, as an example, one of my tenants, who's a single mother, I won't be able to charge her $575. The rent will have to go up to make up for the required repairs at the house. And I don't think that's what your intention is, but I'm telling you that functionally, I know in another municipality, I know that happens.
Could you state the municipality?
Logansport.
Thank you.
So, Delphi, so I've been a landlord here in town for probably 10 years roughly. I don't see your community as being worse from a housing stock perspective than I see in that community. And to what the gentleman in the back was saying, I think what he's alluding to is the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. So theoretically, I don't believe it's been challenged. I don't believe it's gone to the U.S. Supreme Court. But theoretically, if you implement an ordinance like this, you can't say to me, you have to be held to this standard, and not say to the person down the street who is the owner occupant, they have to be held to the same standard. So I don't believe it's ever been challenged, that these regulations and ordinances in municipalities all across the country. But I'm reasonably confident that the current United States Supreme Court would not come down in favor of somebody challenged it and took it to them.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Darren Lear, and I've had rentals in this town for 33 years. Anyway, I'm addressing this one because this is what you gave us to work with. And I put some things on here. A lot of these are going to be repeats of what you've heard already. But 99030, safe and habitable premises. 2, 3, 4, and 5 are covered currently under the health department. And number 7 would be a fire issue. So those things are already covered. I just think that this might be repeating something you already have covered with other departments. Annual registration, 9040, changes to occupancy. And I don't know if this is exactly what this means, but if this means that I have to report my renters are not happy about this. I have a letter from one of them, and one of them is actually in this room. But they don't want their personal information out, and they don't want people walking through their house. I realize you have 72 hours according to this one to, you would have a warning, fair warning, I get that. But they just don't care for that. And I can't think of any other business that is regulated like this. I mean, I realize restaurants have safety inspectors for food, I get that, but they don't ask for your client list. And no other business would want that. Is if it's changes to occupancy means you need my renter's information, they don't want that. And I think this causes some serious privacy issues, and obviously as a property owner, I think this kind of takes away from my rights as a property owner. Let's see, 9050. This makes all landlords subject to fees and inspections because of the poor management of 1 or 2 landlords, which someone else already brought up, I don't remember who now, but I agree with that. You need to target the person or talk to the person that has the problem. My house is, for example, I don't have a roof that's over 3 years old. I take care of mine and I keep them up. Very nice homes. Now, I would live in, some people won't say that about the rentals, but I would. The city of Lafayette has no rental ordinance at all. And if the city decides that Lafayette doesn't see a need for it, I don't see why Delphi does, to be honest with you. If your goal is to have local control over rental units, this ordinance won't cover the larger rental communities. Now, this is under section C of the 99050. It seems that this ordinance will only apply to the small locally owned rental businesses, not the large out-of-town companies that come in. If you look at it, it says they're professionally managed, that they're not subject to that. There's some criteria there, I get that, but my point is that you won't have any control over those. The ones that are professionally managed. This seems unfair to the small rental businesses
That's
like.
3 minutes.
Okay. Seems unfair to the small rental businesses like ours. Just trust us to run our rental businesses like we always have. And I think 99% of them are fine. My 3 minutes are up.
If there's time, we'll certainly come back.
Okay, thank you.
Next, please.
I will. I have concerns about the cost, and I didn't have the lights.
Could you please state your name?
Sorry, just a second.
Thanks.
I have concerns about the expense on the city. The city's already going in debt, and this will cost more to hire another person to do the inspections. We all have leases with our tenants. We all have an agreement with them. If they have a problem, they call and let us know, or they can call the health department and let them know. I feel like this is not something that we need in our community. 23% of this town is landlords and tenants. That's not much. Our community is small, we're a small community. We can still handle things on our own without added expense to our citizens. We have a list of our tenants that we have talked to. We gave them the option, what they wanted to do, whether they were for it or not. We have a list of those that wanted to sign it, so you're welcome to see those anytime, no problem. I even have a list at the store of customers who come in who feel like this isn't right either. We're a small community, the numbers are not big, and we're being taxed a great deal for our numbers of our people of our community. Thank you.
Yes. My name is Ashley. One of the biggest issues that Delphi has is the lack of housing. You're asking for more police officers, you're asking for more teachers, yet you don't have the housing to accommodate them. So passing an ordinance like this is actually gonna deter private investors such as landlords to want to invest in the community and be able to provide that housing that you guys are wanting. So this ordinance really, really is gonna be detrimental, I think, more than it will be helpful.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak? Final opportunity. So if there is no one who hasn't spoken before, who would like to speak, we'll start going back around.
Rebecca Schoen, we had, the opportunity when we moved outside of Delphi to either rent our house or to sell it. We were told by a realtor that said, there's not enough rentals in this town. I really suggest that you rent it. And we rented for 8 years now, and we, started an LLC with the, looking at potentially maybe getting more rentals down the road. Like everybody else, it's not an easy thing, being a landlord. We have 2 kids in college, we work full-time, but anytime there was an issue, he was right there to fix it. We never made our renter wait, we try to keep our property up, but let's face it, it's an old house. They're going to probably find things, things happen, because, it's an old, I don't know, but it's one of those things that you try to do the best that you can, but to hear that you have to pay, to get this done, and you have to pay, you're constantly just trying to do your best. And we tried to make a home for this person that lives there, and, we just want the best for everybody all the way around. We just want our house paid off, and, but now we're looking at, we may just sell it. And we just don't wanna deal with this, to be honest. It's not that we're trying to hide anything, that's not it at all. But again, the house was built 1900, I know that that's kind of the case for a lot of people here. And same for, like what you said about individual homeowners, are we holding them to the same standard, and are they gonna have the same, same safety issues, or whatever, that everybody else has to hold up to being a landlord. So, I think there's been a lot of really good points here, and things that, I think need to be taken into consideration.
Jeff Schoen, our maintenance supervisor. To expand on what she said, and other people have said, you already have the health department, you have the fire department, you have code inspection. They can call the courthouse, they can call the cops, and hey, who do I need to talk to get something fixed in my apartment? You don't need another guy to call that, or inspect us and charge us money. We already pay more in taxes than the normal homeowner on all our properties, because it's a property, it's not a home. We pay more in insurance than a home, because again, it's a rental property. So, if we quit and sell, you're saving us money. You're losing taxes in your area too. So, the stuff is there already to enforce against the bad rent landlords, slumlords, whatever you want to call them. If you wanted to help us, find other ways, but another inspection and more fees is not a way to help us.
I'm Erin Jubilo. I love what you guys have to say. It brought up actually some questions for me, so I don't really have a definitive opinion on this. I grew up on Indiana Street in a very old home, so I understand old homes have issues, right? I've also been a renter my whole life. I've not owned a home yet, so I don't have the experience of what that looks like. However, my question is to this, and it's not an opinion, I'm just really kind of like throwing this out there out of curiosity, and whether I get an answer now or not. My question is, let's say you are a renter and there is an issue, like a concern about a structural problem. And I rent from Doyle, and I've rented from Tom Atkinson, and that's just in this community. So if there's an issue and it's a concern, and I can call the health department, or I can call the fire department, or I can call the courthouse, then let's say any of those entities come out and inspect, right? I'm just assuming that's what would happen. Then what happens? Does then it go back to the owner of the property, and then there's some sort of follow up as far as like, yep, there's concern here, this needs to be fixed, and then ultimately, wouldn't you agree then, in case that maybe there is a big issue, that would then cost money to the property owner, still at that time? So, while I don't really have like a definitive statement on what I'm trying to say, I'm just kind of coming at it from a renter that has rented homes as a single mother, right? Because we talk about single moms, right? And also as a woman who grew up in a very old home and understands that there's stupid things like a toilet that doesn't stop running water for a million years, So there's big issues of concern, and then there's smaller issues that are just dumb old home small issues. Those big issues of concern, I think, need to be dealt with in our community, because we're a historic community. We have a lot of potential. There's so much beauty to what we have to offer. We need to, as a community, care about that. And that's what I believe is why the city cares about it, is trying to help keep that standard high. But at the same time, I understand what everyone is having to say, and not wanting the overreach or feeling like you're being micromanaged. But how do we also make sure that even if a tenant knew that they had the ability to contact one of these entities, then does that still go back on the property owner to fix whatever said issue is? And isn't that still money out of their pocket? So, just something that I think we should ponder. It's still, I don't think many tenants understand that they could actually reach out to another source outside of their property owner. That's, in all honesty, the first time I've ever heard that. So.
I mean, if you're reaching out to your property owner and he's not doing something, then yes, your next step is you call the health department, you call building codes and say, hey, I'm renting this house, this wall's falling down.
Yeah.
And they are going to involve the city, and then it will go after the landlord.
Gotcha.
So.
However, the landlord could vacate it, it's not rented.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because it's a safety issue, and it should be between the landlord and tenant, it's the insurance company. It's not Tesla or fire, whatever, that's the insurance company.
My name's Tim Stewart, and I've had occasions where the last time we talked, you said it was for safety. It's been involved other people come and inspect what we do. I think most of us are pretty professional, and we have a pretty good idea of what's supposed to be running basics being taken care of. But the issue is that oftentimes you get people that think they got something to prove, that have a position, that oftentimes become a vigilante for the purpose of the community. And I've seen that happen in a few cities, and we've had the runarounds as to what was going to go on. And yes, I've had occasions where I argued with the city of Lafayette, because the rule said, but at the same time I said, I'm not going to flood this man's crawl space, because the rules say. because you have to have so many inches between the ground on the inside and the bottom floor joist, and we run round and round. But after I've taken him out and walked him around the neighborhood, every yard in the entire neighborhood drained down to that one house. And it's because I didn't put it in according to what he wanted. But I told him I'm not gonna do that because I'm not gonna make a duck pond in that individual's base or crawl space. And he said, you're right. So know what the rules are. But the thing is, that you have to have people that are willing to work with each other. And I think back to the good neighbor policy is the best thing we can do because you eliminate so much trouble. Because if somebody comes to me and tells me about structural things, I'm amazed. I've traced down places where the last nail snapped. I could tell you where it was. But the problem is that oftentimes people get the persons involved and it becomes a trouble. And so I don't think we really need the extra persons involved because who do you hire? An electrician? Do you hire an engineer? Do you hire somebody that's a structural engineer? What, you get a plumber? You know, when it's all said and done, you'd have to prove to us, I guess, that they have more value of understanding than what we do. And so, that could be another liability. But I'm just saying that, we're getting into a situation where, you can't hit the bottom of it, it just keeps on going. And so, I just think we really need to be wise about what we're doing because it does make a public interest. These people have all invested in our community. And if they stop investing, every building I bought in Delphi had to be fixed up. And it cost thousands of dollars. Well, guess what? I'm up to the point where I can retire, but I'm not. Because they still have to be fixed. And so I go upstairs when I don't want to, but at the same time, if they got a problem, I got a problem too. And I love my neighbors as well as you do. And the problem is I'm not gonna disappoint them because I wanna be a good neighbor. And I think that's really the best policy we have.
Brian Garrison, longtime resident, don't own any properties. Listened, came back when I was on the city council, this was in discussion, some of the things that we need to be looking into to help advance our city forward. I have listened to what everybody said, and I agree with what every one of them said. I can't look here and say who's a terrible landlord and who's not, but we have them. So, that being said, and all you people that are here, and like I said, I don't know who we are, what's your rent, where your properties are, or anything. What would be helpful, I think, to the council and your all selves, is if we also hear from you what you think we can do to help. Don't know percentages, I'm just gonna shoot this out. The 20% of people that don't comply, that are putting people in rentals, that they just happen to get lucky and buy them a sheriff's cell that shouldn't have anybody in, and just move them in. So I would like to hear from some of the landlords, what your ideas are, something we can do, the council can do, the city can do, or we can do as just individuals, to pull that 20% up to where we at least know we're providing safety, we're providing the quality of life we need for the neighbors that have to live next to the house, that are owned by renters, that don't take care of it, that pile their trash, and do all them things. I heard code enforcement, we don't have any code enforcement in this county, we never had. So how do we get to a state where we bring them 20% up that match all you people? And I'd just like to hear some of them comments, just to see if as landlords, you can give us some help to come up with something that applies to all of us. And I agree with so heartedly what I heard about homes too, because it's not all landlords that are driving down property values. It's a lot of homeowners also. But what are some of the things as a community we can do to help us grow and let other people know, hey, Delphi and Carroll County, we're going places and we want you part of us. I think as a city council, we need your input more than just your chastisement because we're trying to do something. I don't think the city has provided anything that's set in stone. So now's a good time to put forth some information that goes both ways. Thank you.
I'm not a property owner, but in some of the research that I've done, some new trend in smaller towns that have a lot of older home neighborhoods, the city is actually able to offer low interest loans
Myers, 949 Washington Street. I'd like to give a suggestion of what, on top of what Ryan was saying. Have all these folks have a committee of their own and elect a few chosen ones and have them police their own. Have them have their own committee rather than the city do it. Let them take care of it. If they don't, then 3 or 4 or 5 people, whatever they elect to have out of their committee, and have them come to you and say, we got a problem here, and or whoever, the health department, whoever they need to do, and whoever out of the homeowners, the landlords, will want to step up and police their own, in other words, that's what it's like to do. Thank you.
It was just Delphi Youth Baseball, but we kind of did the same thing. Like, we had a situation where we were trying to make some changes to some things, and we were going, don't laugh at me, Dave, we were going to, essentially kind of make some decisions that we knew was gonna possibly upset some people. And instead, like to what Dave said, instead we suggested, actually, why don't we get you guys to take a vote on it, you guys to come up with some things in a reasonable amount of time, and if in that reasonable amount of time you can't come to a great consensus, then we will vote and make that choice for you, and it was actually pretty useful. I mean, we still upset a couple people, but ultimately it was on them, it was in their hands, and they essentially made those decisions, and it was really useful.
Chad Duval again. Sorry for my aggravation. I've attended both of these things and kind of got interrupted both times, so I got a little aggravated. But to further what kind of everybody else is saying, I came here for peace. It wasn't about arguing against or arguing for. It was mainly just maintaining a free market. Because all the private investors that have came here didn't invest in Delphi. They invested in the people that are private citizens of the United States that belong to a community called Delphi. They didn't invest in the people that hold any elected position or anything of that sort. They invested in the people of this community. And those people, if we need regulations, we need to regulate ourselves. And that was my main point. That was why I kept pointing to the Constitution, is because that's where the conversation starts. And it also ends there because it's just unconstitutional, and that's why I kept referring to it.
Katie Mash, been a landlord here in Delphi for 18 years. Don't have the prettiest house in town, but I do maintain it and try and stay on my tenants, and I do repair things when they call. And I had all of the same points that a lot of people brought up tonight, the 3 points. A couple of things that I thought of that maybe hadn't been drilled into further were, the cost to the city of hiring a building inspector. If you're not already utilizing somebody that you already have, you're gonna have that cost. And then what are their qualifications going to be? Who's in charge of hiring that? Who's in charge of making sure they know the codes and the regulations? So I kind of have a question about, like, this person would be coming in, are they qualified? Do they know the codes? Are we gonna go back and forth on things like that? The other thing was, I agree with this City of Aurora one is not a very good, well-written one, because it does say that rental companies, or professional rental companies are exempt, right? So there's nothing stopping me from going out and saying, well, here's my LLC, I'm a professional person, so I'm exempt from this, because what's your qualification? What's a professional real estate company? The other one would be, and I don't know, maybe they are professional, I don't know if they're here tonight, and I don't want to single them out. But for mobile home parks, I don't know if you've thought about that as well, because a lot of times, a landlord will own the land, but the tenant that rents that piece of land owns their own trailer. So is that gonna be part of this as well? How do you differentiate between that? So, but I do like the idea of the self-management, or forming a committee where it's just volunteers of local landlords that maybe want to get together and brainstorm and come up with ideas. I surmise that the reason behind this might be to, you know, beautify Delphi, get people to want to move here. But I think singling out the landlords is maybe not the best way, because there are other people in the city of Delphi that are not, you know, tenants that don't maintain their houses. So I feel singled out by it, and they don't want that. And we're not, and I think what West Lafayette did is, theirs is great, and they had a motivation behind theirs. But Delphi isn't, you know, it's not a West Lafayette, we're not a campus town. Lafayette isn't doing this, so I'm not really for this.
Christina Langsdorff, I own my house and I own my investment property. And I think that it is completely reasonable for the city to contemplate some basic safety, building inspection criteria. Don't know that it has to just be landlords, I think everyone could benefit from some basic. I don't know anything about West Lafayette's checklist, but it sounded very common sensey, that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to put my voice with the small interest loan thought. I think that's a really good idea for the city to think of other ways to combat what may be these issues. And also, I think, because I didn't know that the tenant could call the health department, and if something would actually then result in being taken care of. I don't know if that's true, but I think some tenant education might be good for just the renters in general. I don't know how, you know, through the city or through, you know, some public communication. So I just wanted to say those are things that maybe would come at it in a different way. I'm not opposed to someone would have inspected my house, it would have been great. So, thank you.
I got one more comment. I'm Krista Watson. Remember that your tenants that live in this town have a choice. They don't have to rent from the landlord, they don't have to stay.
Exactly right.
Also, remember that there are different levels of people, type of people that live in our community. You will never, I don't care what you say, you will never be able to have the perfect level of people in your community that you would like to have. These slumlords, as you call them, they provide a roof over these people's heads. There's a reason for that. God only knows. Not us, God. This one slumlord that I know, he tries very hard to bring his tenants to Christianity. So, I feel like that we were doing what we need to be doing. Sure, we can help him if you want to help him, increase the quality of his location. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with your neighbor policy. But you gotta realize that you can't control what's happening. There's only one person in control.
I have a couple of things. First off, I like having this meeting is a good thing for a lot of different things. I think everybody needs to understand that as a landlord, it's a business. And if you can't make money at it, you're gonna go somewhere else to make money. Putting together a group or something that maybe police it, you know, versus having something like this, which we've already talked with the clerk from that town and said, you know, this didn't really work out well, but there was just too many problems. You know, it really is a liability in a sense. So if you're an inspector, you come to my building and you say this or this, well, are you a structural engineer, or are you an electrician, you know, you have. So that's a big cost to the city to get those kind of people to go there. And then what if they say, hey, it's okay, and then it falls down or whatever? Now who's liable? You put the person there to check it out, and you said it was okay, and now it fell down. I just think that, because unless you've owned properties, I had a friend tell me, unless you run a business, don't come tell me how to run mine. And I thought it was crazy, because I had no business at the time. And then I later on ended up in business with him, and I found out he was right. There's so many things that you don't think about that can happen. As a landlord in this town, I try to hold my rents down. I haven't raised my rents on one of my buildings in 20 years. And you're one of my tenants, take the rent on us. It's the same rent it was 20 it comfortable for them so they can make money, because I don't want a million tenants going in and out of my buildings. And so you start putting all these restrictions in, who's gonna pay? I'm still gonna make money. I'm either gonna sell the building, or I'm gonna raise my rent to cover whatever they throw at me. Or if it's too bad, I'll just vacate the building, you know, I mean, and every other landlord's gonna think that same way, because they own stuff. And unless you've actually owned the building and understand, it's people that tear stuff up. It's not the building or the landlord, it's who owns it. It doesn't have to be there's buildings in town that are privately owned, and those people are trashed it. I've worked with the phone company for 20 years here. I've been in and out almost every house in the county. And I've seen everything from hogs running out of the basement, running right almost over me. You know, that's a private owned house. So, I've had that happen. I've seen diapers stacked this high beside the bed. They said, put a phone outlet here. I'm like, wait a minute. You know, so you can't police everything. And that's where the good neighbor policy comes in, and you do the best you can. You can't say, if you just use a car for example, you can't tell this guy over here, his car gets him to work. It looks like hell, but you really don't have any say-so over it. Do I like it? No. You know, my car may be sitting there, looks a lot better. But I can't say, hey, go get a better car, fix it up. But I just can't afford to do that. So you can't do the same thing and everything else. You just gotta use common sense, I think. And, you know, if there's some specific cases that they're using this on, then let's find out and address it. We'll talk to them and say, hey, look, you're putting heat on everybody because you're being you know. And another thing you find out nowadays, because in these contracts, you find it, fix it. Well, I spent months trying to find somebody to put on heat control. 4 different contracts. And each one said, I'll be there tomorrow, basically. What, 3 or 4 months later, 6 months, I don't know, it took forever. Well, I finally got it done, finally found one, they told me 3 times, they finally did it. So that's the kind of stuff you're gonna run into, there's just so many unintended consequences. And as far as the landlord, you have your agreement with your tenant, and you have insurance, and if the tenant don't like it, nobody's keeping them there, on any rental units, they can move out tomorrow. So I don't think the city needs to take that on. We got other buyers bigger than that, and that's what I think it's a city.
I'd like to finish where I was at a little bit earlier. Some of these things are gonna be repeats of some other people. We do pay a higher tax rate on our rentals than private homes do. And I'd like to point out that if you have a program where the person can complain, I would venture to say that 90% of them that complain are gonna be behind in rent. I can just about guarantee it. To address Mr. Garrison, I think if you have a renter or a landlord that is a problem, let us know. A couple of us can talk to them. We can just say, hey, you're making the rest of us look bad. I think it could be self-policed without being real bad. And I didn't get your name, I'm
Erin.
White. Okay. Your first recourse would be to go to your landlord if there is an issue, and that's 99% of the time it's going to be taken care of right away. Sometimes there are things that you can't do, like you just talking about an eavesdrop or something. There's some things that if you're hiring someone, time constraints, you can't always get it done in 3 days or whatever. You might be a little bit before you find a contractor to fix that eavesdrop. Just an example. And then, like someone else said, renters do have the right to move. And I think in this town, I drove around the other day. Most of the houses that I would consider blight are privately owned, single-family homes. So I don't know that you're gonna correct a lot of blight. This is my personal opinion on this. I just think that this is overreach. It's my personal opinion. And I think as a whole, in this room, the renter or the landlords that are in here, we have nice homes. And I don't think it's fair to make us have to pay these inspection fees and go through all this whole process for 1 or 2 people. So that's all I would say. Thank you.
I'd like to comment again concerning the registration of tenants. West Lafayette does require that you keep on file with the city of West Lafayette the names of all your tenants that are residing in each unit. The reason being is they have an ordinance that requires no more than 3 non-related tenants living in any one rental unit. It was driven by the fact that, you know, on the east side of Purdue University campus, they would buy an older home that might have 4 or 5 bedrooms, put 4 or 5 individuals in each bedroom and have 20 people living at one address, each paying maybe $400 to $500 a month rent, you know, and end up with a situation that's really not safe. So the limitation was 3 individuals, non-related individuals living in any one rental unit, you know, and yep, they don't keep any social security numbers or anything. All you have is a form to fill out with the name of the tenant and who the landlord is. That goes to the city. When the inspector comes, if that doesn't match, then they're gonna be asking questions. Now, you might think that I'm really in favor of it, but there are certain things with West Lafayette that didn't work very well for us. One of them was the requirement that driveways and sidewalks must be cleaned within 8 hours of the end of a snowfall event. You know, West Lafayette got hammered with about 18 inches of snow there one year, and our tenants had the driveway cleared, the sidewalk cleared. There was a few little tracks where the pickup trucks drove in the driveway that was stuck on the cement. The code enforcement officer stopped and was threatening to write a citation. The tenant very wisely said, look, it's 3 days after the end of the snowfall event, and the street is not plowed yet. You know, our sidewalk and driveway were clear, the neighbors were not. They're not rentals, so it doesn't do a whole hell of a lot of good. You know, from that standpoint, that's kind of a negative on that. The other one is there was some discussion about possibly having a group create rules and stuff. You know, well, the group could create rules and stuff for rentals, but they have no enforcement ability. So it's like, you know, if it's a voluntary program to meet certain standards and somebody doesn't, what recourse is there? There's absolutely none. The only other option you would have would be to create something like a Delphi Rental Association that all members subscribe to and hold themselves to a certain minimal standard of quality for all their rental units, you know. And that association would then, you know, if a member did not maintain their properties, you know, would be kicked out of the association. That would be a good source for people to find people who do rent properties and be assured that they meet certain safety and health requirement criteria. You know, but that would take a lot of people in this room getting their heads together and saying, hey, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna form this and we're gonna create our own bylaws and stuff. You know, you can do that without a lot of expense, takes a lot of time and stuff on the effort of people to do that. But, you know, I think it possibly could be effective. So, those are just my thoughts.
Dale Seward, if you were around here 10, 15 years ago, you would have noticed a lot of empty houses and a lot of houses that were dilapidated and not being utilized with tenants or living quarters or whatever. We have wonderful people in this neighborhood or in this community. Katrina Pearson, Darren Brown, and several others in and out of this building who have bought those houses over the years and fixed them up so they weren't sitting there run down and ready to fall down. And from a businessman's standpoint, if we look at this and make it harder for that to happen, we're gonna have more empty homes and more dilapidated buildings that we don't want. And when you exclude bigger companies from being under this ordinance, that is not fair to the local people. And you're gonna drive between the two of those topics and between the two of those points, you're gonna drive those people out. And from a growth standpoint, we all want growth, we don't want an explosion of it, but it's gonna cost us. It's gonna cost us more than what it's gonna benefit us, I believe, down the road.
Well, he did mention that exclusion, he was bringing that earlier. Well, I've seen a lot of cases, the bigger companies that come in and have the property managers, but that's a fine line, and to define a property manager. There is some state laws on that, and manage your own property, be a professional property manager without a real estate license. Sometimes attorneys can do it, but what you run into here is, you get these big companies, a lot of times they don't live here. They put all these rentals, they don't give a damn. They're the ones that bring in people that are property, and same way with these section houses from HUD. Sometimes that brings in a lot of people you don't want. So in reality, you do have HUD rules you have to follow. You still have your lease with your tenant, you still gotta match your insurance company, because they have rules. They'll ask you a million things when you insure your property. You have this, you have that, okay, well, we're not gonna insure it. So again, you know, I understand we wanna make things better, we all like it. There's only so much you can do. And to police ourselves and each other, the landlord, you don't need a big association, do that like he said, you know, they're not gonna, you can't do it, you don't have the power to do it, no different than the city would really, at the end of the day. People are gonna screw things up, they're gonna screw it up anyways. And it don't matter if they're gonna have a property. Yeah.
Concerning safety, now, I'm not trying to be a nice horse to death because I believe in safety. But at the same time, we just got through a COVID epidemic that had to do with a lot of us. And for us to go in and out without masks on, we were treated like, you know, you got the plague. Okay, and my concern is that you started, where and how do you get it pulled back where it's reasonable? Because you had to have a shot. Now you got more troubles if you got the shot, and I'm not trying to bring up anything, but I'm just simply saying, Israel did a survey on this, and it's like 17,000 to 1, you're better off if you never got the shot. The problem is, okay, I'm not trying to be, you know, I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep it on the topic of
Okay,
running
well,
property.
that is part of it.
Okay, thanks, Tim. For the drain.
My concern as a citizen, I got a lot of voice, it's fine. My concern as a citizen, I've lived here for about a year and a half now as a renter. I'm a former homeowner. I've also a former business owner as well. And when things like additional costs, all of these landowners that rent out their properties, they're business owners. And any cost that they incur trickles down to us as renters. And there's a reason why we are renters. And I don't need to bust anybody's bubble, but the feds just increased the interest rates again today. That's the reason why we're currently still renting and not a homeowner again, is because it's too expensive. And so any additional costs, we've all been strangled these last 3 years with inflation, and everything else has just been terrible. We don't need more regulations. We need less. Let people breathe for a little bit. That's what we need. And it'll be cheaper too. That's what we really need.
If I may, if you want to offer, anybody else that has not gotten to speak.
So if there is anyone who would like to speak who has not already had a chance, this is your opportunity. Now hit about 1 hour of discussion, so if everyone who is here has had an opportunity to speak, if you wish. I'm looking back to see if there are people behind me here. If not, we definitely appreciate your input. This has been very helpful, I think, for all of us. And I think some interesting ideas have come out tonight that we can definitely take under consideration. Does the council have any, anything that they would like to add?
Just appreciate the involvement. I mean, people
4 years on the council, we haven't had this big of a turnout for any discussion whatsoever. So,
Set a record.
yeah, I could really truly appreciate the involvement from the community.
I would add that I don't think, I think this has been helpful, and I don't think that we're in any big hurry to make any decisions or pass any sort of ordinance. I think that, you know, by introducing the ordinance that we did, it was a good way to get the ball rolling, but again, I don't think that any decision is gonna be made rashly or, any quickness, but I do think that we can figure something out to kind of help with the problem.
You have a very, very good points that I very appreciate. The things maybe I hadn't done it either, so I appreciate all the input. It was really good.
It's good to hear from, how you were landlords and property managers and other titles that are here, and, it's good to hear your viewpoints. And, we've learned some things because, I'm not a renter, I used to be at one time, we realized that renting is a different style of living, and that involves, property manager or landlord that you have to deal with, and sometimes that is a good situation, and sometimes you have issues with things not being done when you desire in the property or in the home, so we appreciate your comments.